TFT Hacker has created a product for Obsidian. It's a CSS snippet, but it upgrades the canvas inside of Obsidian like tenfold. It's amazing, and for those of you that don't want to pay for this product, I still think this video will help you, give you some ideas on how to use Canvas potentially outside of the typical uses for a mind map. Full disclosure, TFT Hacker did give this to me, but I would have paid for it if he hadn't have given it to me. And this is the vault, so you get an entire vault with this CSS snippet. For those curious, this is the Canvas Candy CSS snippet that comes with the Canvas Candy vault. So I've copied the CSS snippet file, put it into my vault, and now I get all of the features in my vault. But the Canvas Candy vault does everything that I would need to explain how this thing works. And for those of you completely unfamiliar with Obsidian, this is a canvas. So I can hold control on my keyboard and scroll with my mouse wheel to zoom in and out. I'm using my mouse wheel click to drag around in the canvas. Down the bottom, there are 3 different types of cards you can bring into the canvas. There is the media card where you bring it in and it lets you pick any sort of image that's inside of the vault folder. So that's this specific vault. There is the file card, which lets you bring in any file into the canvas, which is what you may use for mapping things out. And then there are these types of cards, which are essentially blank cards. You can see drag to add a card. You can add that blank card into the canvas, or you can double left click to also create a card. By default, if I click on the card, I can change the color of the card to any color that I want, but that's about it. You can then drag from the dot of any of the 4 sides of the card to connect it to another card. Then when you click on that arrow, you have a normal arrow, a non-directional arrow, or a bi-directional arrow. And then you could right click and then create a group, which lets you group different cards inside of it. So you can then move grouped cards all around, as you can see, as a group. However, all of these cards have headers. They have a different sized headers and they have different borders, and that's what Canvas Candy does. If I hop into the features folder and click on borders, you can see we're now in a different canvas. You can tell it's a canvas file. We've got what looks like dividers, but they're actually cards. We then have a heading, which you can see doesn't have a border. So I come all the way to the top, double click on the file. This is what Canvas Candy is doing. So it's adding a CSS classes, so I can add a class to a blank card and then say Canvas Candy, border, none. So get rid of the border. And then the second thing it's doing is making it transparent. So if I left click to copy and then paste, I've now pasted the exact same card. But if I remove this CSS, this is what it would look like in default Obsidian, but this is what it looks like with the Canvas Candy. These yellow lines, if I click on it and drag up, you can see is just a card. If I then double click at the bottom, it then turns it into a divider, or at least what looks like a divider. So if I double click into this card, 3 dashes, type CSS classes, colon, then CC dash, I want to remove the border, so border dash none. I then click out, you can see now there's no border, but we've still got that color, and I can change the color to green, or I can change the color to purple, or any of those colors. Now we've removed the border, but it's also made it transparent, so CC dash, and now we want to change the card, so card, and we want to make it transparent. So now when I click out, there is no border, and it's transparent, just like the one inside of this canvas. So I'm going to delete that, and if we come down, you can see these are all the options currently available anyway. So this is a card with no border and grey color selected, resulting in no visible background. So if we double click, there's the border none. So there is no border on this card. If I double click here, you can see we've got no border, but there is a yellow background. This card has, as you can see, no border, but there is a green background, and this one has no border, but it's transparent. So if I drag it, you can see that the words appear on top of any other card, which makes it much easier, much nicer to see the differences between cards, which we'll get to some examples later. Scrolling down, you can then further customize the border and have it just at the top, just at the bottom, on the left, on the right, maybe top and bottom, left or right, top left. You can essentially customize the border wherever you want and line that up with whether it's showing the background color or not. So if we double click, you can see we've got the first bit that's saying border left, then we've got the second one that's saying border right, Third one says border, make it dotted. Now I personally don't see this as dotted. Maybe that's something going on with the CSS. And then we've also got the transparent. But if we go up to the border types, you can see there's the dashed and there's the dotted borders. So I actually see them work inside of my vault. Maybe it's something to do with changing borders specifically. I'm not sure. TFT Hacker can obviously let us know in a comment to the video. But when I double click on this, you can see we've just got one single class that's added, which is saying border, make it dotted. This one is border, turn it dashed. This one adding a drop shadow. This one making them double, so you can see the lines. There's now a double line border around the card. This one having a drop shadow, but you'll also notice the corners are squared. This is rounded, this is squared, so if we double click, you can see the first one is adding the drop shadow, but the second one is making the border squared. And going a little bit further, you can then make the border rounded, so instead of having a square or a squircle, I don't know what shape it would be, you can make it rounded so it looks like an oval. But that's just the border customization with a little bit of the card. If we then go to the cards section, you can see loads of different shapes. So zooming into the background, we have the transparent background, which we've already seen, but now we have a transparent background with a different shaped card. So you can have the transparent background, shape it as a circle, and then also, with the card, make it center all of the words. So as a reminder, in default Obsidian canvas, you have this squircle, square, I don't know, rounded square thing, and the text is always aligned to the left. But with Canvas Candy, you can center the text, you can make it circular, elliptical, and center the text. So adds a lot of possibilities when you're trying to create different flowcharts and things inside the canvas. And if we have a look over to the left-hand side, you can see you can add CC image cover and image clip as well, so you can play around with the image background. And for those curious, this is also a card inside of the canvas. So everything inside of this canvas is a card. If I zoom in, you can see that's the border of the card, but there's no border because it's being hidden and it's transparent, so it just looks like there's text on the canvas. To me, this just looks nice and clean. Moving down to the centering section here, you can see it's a centered card. As you would expect, you've got CSS, card, center, and it's centered all of the words that you've added in the card. And for those familiar with Obsidian, you can add anything into a blank card. I personally add a data view query in there. You could treat it just like text and adding bullet points like this, which is what is the example shown. However, you can further customize the centering using callouts. So if I double click, we've got text. Then there is a callout inside of the card. If I click on the code to edit the callout block, we've got inside of the callout identifier is CC callout center. So what that's going to do is make the callout block centered. So centered callout contents are the words that's going to be shown inside of this centered block with text below. So when we click out, there is the text that's in the callout and it's been centered because of the CSS styling. Moving down to basic shapes, we have the regular squircle is what I'm going to call it because I can't think of any other word. We then have the circle, which if I double click, you can see we've got the shape as a circle and the card's been centered as well with the text. And here we've got the same, it's a shape circle, but if I double click, we have the rectangle. I can then move this all the way out and now you can see the ellipse has been changed. Double click, I drag it all the way back. Now it looks a little bit more like a square, but obviously the alignment's a little bit off because it's centered, so feel free to fiddle around as you would do with like every other mind mapping app. Then there are parallelograms. Why you would want parallelograms is a great question because that's what I initially asked. If you double click, let's just make this a little bit bigger so you can see you've got parallelogram left, then CC card center with the text in there. This is text that's been bolded for those curious. If I click out, now the parallelogram is there. We can adjust the sizing. And this is a shape that actually works really well in some of the flowcharts and some of the examples that I'll get to in a minute. Moving up to combining borders and cards, you can see we've got the regular shape here. We've got a twisted diamond shape, combined 3 diamonds together, and what this is doing is using CC card fill. So when I double click, see CC classes, CC card, and it's using the border color as the fill color. So if I was to change this from gray to red, now I have a red squircle or a green squircle, and we can go to any color and pick any color that we want, and that's the color that it will get. And then you can combine multiple together. You can see these are just 3 diamonds all combined, and these were actually created using the card fill, but rotate card 45 degrees. So it's just rotated the card 45 degrees. That looked kind of odd. So we now have a rectangle that's rotated 45 degrees. Then we have our circle, but here we also have a circle with other shapes blocking it. So if we double click here, this is also a shape. You can see it's got no border and it's a circle shape. But because it's grayed out, there's no default color to it, it's actually hiding the circle, the cyan. I think that's a cyan. It's a blue. It's a bluey green color. I don't know. But it's hiding that color to create the whatever shape you would call that, which to me looks pretty cool. Then we have a simple just shape on shape. So you got the fill background and then you have a text block on top, which can then be further customized by gradients. There are gradient colors in this, it's so cool. Now there is a limitation to this from my understanding. It's 0, 45, 90, blah, blah, blah. These are the main options that you can get. And as you can see, this is the gradient you'll see. So that's a 45 from dark to light. This is 270. So if I change the color from purple, let's say to green, it's added the gradient for that color, which to me is really nice, really useful. It just adds a little bit of flair, I guess you could say, to the canvas, which again, I'll show you in the examples, some very nice use cases. And similar to this rotation, you can also rotate the text inside of the card. So if we come in here, make this a little bit bigger so you can see it's rotating the text rather than the card 315 degrees. So close that down a little bit. You can see the text has been rotated rather than the card, or you can rotate the card. So both of them being options. Why you'd want stuff upside down, I don't know, but it's an option, it's possible. Moving on to, I think, my favorite part about Canvas Candy is headers and borders. Having simple cards is fine, it's great, but just being able to add a header to a card adds so much to what a card can do. And you can see this is the call out setting. So when I double click, we've got a header. It's a call out block, CC header, and then just the words that want to be in the header at the top. And then we've got the code block and decorations in here as actual like card information to be shown. But it creates the header. If we change the color, it will maintain that header. It's just going to keep the same. And obviously we can add all of the border, the card, all of those previous decorations that we've got in borders and cards can be added with a header because it's all in a blank card. The difference down here, you can see there is no thick line under the header. This one has a thick line, this one doesn't, because this one's got CC, header, and then no border. So it's removing the border from the header. And just for comparison, you can see this one's got CC header, this one is CC header, no border. And it works exactly the same for a footer. So you can have a footer with a border or a footer without a border with whatever text you want inside of the card. But these don't have to be separated. So if I come into here and let's just go to the command palette, Control P, and then go call out, you can insert a call out like that using a hotkey or manually type in the text if you want. I'm going to remove that text. We have the title, so I'm going to get rid of note, CC dash header. Then I'm going to replace this with header, just really original, click out. Now I have a header and a footer. If I want to make this a bigger header, I can use the hashtag to turn it into a heading 1 using the markdown. Now when I click out, it's a much bigger header and it's kind of squished everything else. So let's just make that a bit bigger. There we go. It now doesn't look as squished. So now we have a big header and a small footer. And you can then use all of the markdown that you would normally use in Obsidian to customize this to, well, however you want. But it doesn't stop there. As you can see, you can add a label attached to the left. So CC label left with no border, or the right. So essentially you can add a label, header, footer, something that identifies the card at any side of a card. Again, using callout, CC, label, left, and then whatever you want to call it. So if I was to change this to something else, actually, let's add a link to this just because I can. So let's add a link there. Now that looks really nasty on the red, so let's just change the color to blue. Now it doesn't look so horrific. We now have a blue card with a left label, and because this is a link, I can click it and it will take me to the exact same file because I've just linked it to itself because I'm stupid. Okay, let's make it so that it links to something other than itself, so it actually changes where we are. Now when I click it, it takes us to that file, so you can have a link inside of a header, label, footer, and information inside of the card. Again, utilizing the borders and cards because all of this, there's no border, it's transparent, and it's a heading. So it's a level 1 heading on top of this card that looks like a divider because it's been collapsed. This one, exactly the same. none, transparent. So it just looks like something that you're writing on, which is where potentially you could use the canvas instead of using a file for all of your writing, because there's your column. Like, there's your columns of text. That looked bad, but yeah. So it for me is far more flexible, which is why I love the canvas. But this just adds a completely new level to the way you can use the canvas. And then stickers is just icing on the cake, I guess you could say. The person down here being a sticker. It's a PNG file added. There is a video to TFT Hacker. It's on YouTube, so I'll leave a link in the description below to TFT Hacker's work. This is also a sticker, so it's a rocket. If you change the color, I can't imagine it doing anything because it's just a PNG file. But here, he's utilized a PNG image, so this speech mark thing is as an image, and then if I click out, and so if I double click on the card, you can see you got border none, card transparent, and that card appears on top of the PNG sticker, assuming you don't click the sticker. So if I click off, you can see the card is now in front, and it gives you this nice little display. I personally haven't found a use for stickers, but those that want to spruce up, I guess you could say, their canvas, there you go. Maybe for your home dashboard, you can add in some icons and things like that. I'm seeing lots of potential here. But now moving on to some of the use cases of what this could look like when you combine all these different features. So we have an ellipse with a gradient, with words being centered at the top. Then we have a different shape of a card, a different shape of a card. If we double click, you can see there's the shaping, and it's been rotated. Because he's a card, you can then direct the arrows out of. So the arrow is going out of this card that's been rotated into a group. That's a default Obsidian feature with just a follow-up group that can move all the cards inside of it with words going next to it, and the words are attached to that line. So if you double click on a line, you can then type text. So if I type text, it then adds text here. That's a default Obsidian feature, but that's been utilized between these two cards. This again has been rotated. This is a different shape. This one has no border, very similar on this side, so you have a flowchart that looks actually like a flowchart rather than just rectangles going into other rectangles. And with this one, very much like all the other cards, no border and transparent, giving you a title. This next example having text, so if I double click here, this is an actual file. So you can see as I hover, Blue Jay is a file. That's not this card down here, that's an actual file, written file inside of Obsidian that you would normally see. There are footnotes, so you've got footnote 1, footnote 2, there is an image in here as well, so that's a Blue Jay image file put inside of this normal markdown file with a heading, and that has the CSS classes border none on it. So if I come out, this is the file. However, on top, you can see this is a dotted border. So when I double click, it's a card, transparent, and border is dashed, and that's got information in. So this is highlighting a section of a file without actually doing anything in the file. So bolded text, and then compiled footnotes, because these are the footnotes you'll see inside of the reading view. If I click on the file, and I click on there, it will take me to footnote 2. If I click on 1, it will take me down to footnote 1 of the file. If I control and click, you can see this is the actual file. So this is the actual file inside of Obsidian, but it's been added inside of the canvas, and then transparent cards are being used to identify different sections of that card. A very interesting use case, not one I would personally use, but still something you could use when you're showing something or explaining something in a potential presentation or explaining how Obsidian Canvas works, like this. Now, this timeline canvas, although I'm not that interested in the Apollo missions, this timeline canvas could be used, and I am using at the moment, in doing timelines for my story. So for those unfamiliar, I'm writing a fiction book, and I'm using this sort of design, this style, to timeline out the story. So chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, 4, etc., with notes coming out of it. So we have an image file. That's just a default Obsidian media card that's been dragged in. And down here we have the circle card. Then we have a card with no border that's transparent. Then we have the parallelogram to the left. As you can see, another card inside of that, no border with transparent. So if I make that a little bit smaller, you can see there you've got the heading in there, because if I double click in here, you can see we've got the CSS shape, it's been centered, and then we have the parallelogram in there as well. So you've got essentially a timeline in here with lines coming out. Now, what are the lines? The lines are also cards. So if I click on the line, you can see it's now highlighted something. So if I change the color yellow, now it's changed the color here yellow. So what is this? How has he done this? Well, if we drag it around, you can see, oh, it's actually a card. If I let go and let's just move it up here. What's been done is the CSS classes has a border left and is transparent. So it's only showing the left border, which makes it look like a line. And you can just align that there, and now you've got 2 lines. For 2 lines doing exactly the same thing, just with 2 different cards. And this could certainly be done in default canvas, which is what I started using, but with this design, it just looks nicer. Rattling through some of these next examples to avoid repeating myself, you can see on the far left, we have something that's got a fill color. So if we drag this out, no border, card fill, and it's squared. So if we drag this down, you can see there we've got the travel agency that's inside of a callout block to turn it. And then we've got the lines going across, very similar to what we've seen before, all with these different bordered, colored, turned different cards. This next example using the header inside of this card, the header and footer inside of this card with text inside of the footer. This one having the left label, this one header and footer with tables that's just default Obsidian tables inside of the card for further information. An overview canvas, so maybe this could be a summary of something you're researching, a lit review or something like that, where you've got left, you've got type 1 as a label left, type 2 as a label left. These are actually files. As you can see when I hover, it says what is type 2. So if I was to control and click, there is the file. If I go into edit mode, go into the code block, you can see there's the left label type 2. And if I go into the source mode, you can see there's the CSS class. So this is a file that's been added inside of Obsidian, just the samples, media, sample notes, diabetes folders inside what is type 2 file. And then inside the canvas, it shows in this view, changing the color to whatever you want, giving a nice little flow of information being shown in the canvas rather than in a file. So this is where you've got all your columns and stuff that you might want to see. Also with this nice little sort of like info block down here. The video embeds just typical Obsidian stuff where you've got a video and then you embed the video link and it's just going to show the video, and it just happens to be in a card with a footer down the bottom. This example, more of your typical mind mapping with lots of stickers or PNG icons inside of Obsidian that you can use to move around. This example as a product design team org chart. So again, these are cards, but they have gradients. They've got different color gradients, the lines going between the cards with the images. So if I double click, you can see we've got the border left, border double, and then card gradient, and we then have the image that's embedded underneath. Product development, a very simple flowchart that goes from left to right. You can see without the borders, giving it a different aesthetic. Stakeholder mapping, similar sort of flowchart, but again, drastically different aesthetic, so you can see the difference between the views, unlike with the Obsidian default canvas where they all look exactly the same. A potential storyboarding example with footers down the bottom, this one having the left border, no other borders, footers left with explanations inside of the cards rather than the full files, which again, it just looks nice with a header at the top, which is something that people may want. Instead of like a banner situation, you could use something like this, which again is just card center with no border. Nothing particularly special in here, except you may notice that there are numbers sort of spread all over the place. They're not inside of the lines because you can drag them around, and this is where the no border transparent card becomes really useful, because you can just add any text anywhere you want. So you can add information in wherever you want for the specific card, maybe something at the bottom for a side note or a side point that you may want to make. This example using the opaque element of a card, so you can see we've got opaque card and then you've got the crossover colors between the three. This one looking much more involved, but again, it's just a card that's a line, a card that's a line, a arrow which is coming out of, as you can see down here, it's been very clever, used a card down the bottom with an arrow going up to the top, which directs into, again, a card, but this card doesn't have any border and is transparent. This one does. And then this arrow doing exactly the same, evolution, which gives you those chart arrows, which again, you can just add information on using transparent, no border cards with the lines. This one having circles, giving you points and arrows going all over the place, which is the flexibility of the Obsidian canvas combined with the CSS. Moving on to the writing sample, which is a typical mind map of a circle, centered, then you've got borders down the bottom, borders on the right, borders down the bottom, borders on the left, with different colors giving you a different look. Because of the added customization this CSS snippet adds, I may actually start moving some of my files into canvases, because I can display the information much more freely inside of a canvas. But the previous limitations of the default Obsidian is you couldn't center information, you couldn't add a header or a border, and adding colors was difficult because it was just one block color, and adding small pieces of information here, there, again, wasn't doable because you didn't have the transparent or no border options. This CSS snippet gives me that. If you have any thoughts, ideas, use cases, or things you'd want me to explore, develop, or even showcase, let me know in the comment section below.